The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Real Pickles, a worker-owned cooperative in Greenfield producing organic fermented vegetables sourced from Northeast farms. More information at realpickles.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte.
Did you miss us?
I did. Khalees, you were just at a big music festival in Knoxville, and I didn't even get to talk to you yet about who you loved. But maybe if we have time at the end of the show, we'll get to
we can talk about it tomorrow, too.
We'll just talk about it at our desks.
I will still have been.
Meanwhile, we are bodily back in the studio and eager to see what April holds for Western Mass. We didn't have any April Fool's jokes.
No.
Too bad for us.
The joke is that we came back to work.
Yeah, right. So later in the show, we will honor 4 decades of an organization inspiring courageous adults to go back to school to learn the basics and to strive for their high school equivalency degree as we introduce you to Colleen Kaczynski, the executive director of the Literacy Project, who celebrate 40 years this Friday with an event in Northampton, as well as a graduate of the Literacy Project's programs, Sagrario Turner.
But we begin with the 4th annual Power of Truth's Arts and Education Festival happening in Bombyx and Florence this Friday and Saturday.
The festival is dedicated to harnessing the power of arts and education for racial and social justice and returns for its 4th year.
Sponsored by Self-Evident Education and the Northampton Arts Council, the festival offers a unique opportunity to help build a community dedicated to seeing and understanding the history of racism and resistance, how that history is manifest today, and learning together how we can create a free and just future for all Americans.
We are joined by one of the festival founders and the executive director of Self-Evident Education, Mr. LR, Michael Lawrence Riddell.
And by the Know the Ledge headliner, Atlanta by way of DC hip-hop artist Sa Rock, who's been spinning Truth into Cadence on wax since 2018. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, good to be here.
Mr. LR, I call you that jokingly because I've been lucky enough to have been following your career doing this sort of thing since you were a public educator in the public school system and longing for some type of curriculum that would be able to adequately and appropriately for the ages that the students were, these really, really hard topics. You then went on to go and help kind of create that template. What a time we live in now when these things are not allowed in some circumstances to be talked about. But can you talk about that beginning of this journey for you?
Yeah, certainly. The work that we're doing has always been needed, right? This country has a long history of marginalizing and leaving certain stories out of the historical record and then mythologizing the stories that it does include in the historical record, right? And so when I founded Self-Evident Education, it was 100% to create a space to bring stories to the forefront that would help people understand the ways in which race has been created in this country, the way it's been weaponized, and the way it continues to be weaponized, right? And to do that through storytelling, right? So we create these short documentary films that tell, engaging and accessible stories for all audiences, right? For school age audiences, for beyond. It's kind of like Lego, right? That like ages 4 to 99 or whatever Lego says it's for, right? That's what we do. And so that was the genesis of it, right? And now we're really seeing it come to a head where there is an active movement currently to bring us back to a space where we're denying the existence of certain stories, whether it's through executive order or it's through, other forms of sort of intimidation, and so it just amplifies for me and puts a point on why this work that we're doing continues to be so important.
Sarak, I'm curious because you grew up in DC. Like, how much of these histories did you learn in school as somebody who also spent just a couple of years in the DMV in school?
Well, luckily for me, I went to private school, and it was a school that concentrated on Pan-African centered curriculum. So I was able to learn as much about my history and these important historical figures that a lot of our current generation, unfortunately, is seeing omitted from, their history books and, omitted from the curriculum. And my parents also had uh, a lot of books and videos that we were exposed to at an early age. So it's always been a passion of mine to walk in the footsteps and the legacy of those people who sacrificed so much for me to be here.
It's absolutely in your verses too,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's been amazing knowing that you were coming on the show, just spending time listening to what you were rapping about, and it's incredible stuff.
Thank you.
That is Sarak, who will be performing as part of Day 2 of the Power of Truths Festival at Bombyx in Florence this Saturday. And you're going to be part of Know the Ledge Hip Hop History Live, which is a theatrical production that combines storytelling and this historical exploration that we've been talking about. It'll be narrated by Acrobatic, who was on the show last year with us when we talked about, was that 2 years ago? Oh my goodness, we're getting old even in this show. I'm curious, Sarak, are you bringing your own verses to this history, or did somebody write a script? Because you're playing Fannie Lou Hamer, I believe, right?
Right. You know better than to ask an MC if they're writing their own verses.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
No, yes. I was honored to be able to write a piece about Fannie Lou Hamer, and particularly because my father, she's been a hero of my father's for so many years, since I can remember. And there's so many things that I'm excited about bringing to this. So much of, just performance is about like using every part of your body to tell a story, and not just like reciting lyrics, and to be able to kind of allow her spirit to imbue me as I tell this story through my own medium is really important. I come from a family of sharecroppers, and I think that my attempt to tell that story, it was insufficient because there's so much history that we have not talked about in this country, and increasingly and alarmingly so, that history is being erased from the dialogue, the conversation in this country. So I'm so excited to be able to share my perspective and my view of her, and just honor her as much as I can on stage.
Perhaps alluding to what we were discussing earlier, there may be people who aren't as familiar with Fannie Lou Hamer as you are now.
Fix it.
Yeah, and your attempt to fix this through rap on Saturday at the Power of Truths. She's a civil rights icon leader in the 1960s. But what's something interesting that you maybe found out about Fannie Lou Hamer while creating this piece for the Power of Truths Festival at Bombyx, Sarak?
Honestly, a lot of it was tragic. I was familiar with, her history, where she was from, and, her role in, demanding civil rights for farmers and things like that. But a lot of, the forced sterilization in her history, I can't put it in any cleaner, nicer terms than this: the murder of her daughter by a hospital refusing to admit her daughter because of her activism and her fight for voting rights for Black people and all people, and her just abuse by the system, by police officers. And so it was challenging to research what I needed to research, and to put as much into this, 24 bars that, I wrote to tell her story, because so much of that was important to speak to how much more powerful it was that she continued to her very last breaths to fight for these causes at the expense of herself and her family's safety and her physical body. So I wanted to put as much of that history in, as tragic as it might be, as, emotionally challenging as it might be to the listener. These are the stories that allow us to see just how resilient we are, allow us to see just how much terrorism we've endured at the hands of this country and this country's systems, and also see how beautiful it is at what we've created and what we were able to do because of the hard work and the sacrifice that was put in by not just Fannie Lou Hamer, but so many of, or all of the activists that are going to be portrayed at this show tonight. So it's just so important, especially in these days and times, for us to make sure we are using all of our tools and our toolkit to be able to bring and breathe history to life.
And we're talking about Know the Ledge Hip Hop History Live, which is part of Saturday night's events at the Power of Truths Festival happening at Bombyx in Florence. And we're speaking with Sal Rock, who will be portraying Fannie Lou Hamer, alongside Dutch Rebel, Marcia Gomes, Adrian Mac Davis, and more, who are part of this Hip Hop History Live, which is part of a broader festival, this Power of Truths, happening Friday and Saturday. We're also joined with Michael Lawrence Riddell, who is one of the founders of this festival. And from Self-Evident Education, you're also presenting some of the videos and things that you've been working on. And I remember last time we talked, I believe you were working on videos that were going to be at the Smithsonian. And just last week we heard new information about the Smithsonian and maybe how those history museums will be reframing the history that was already being reframed by folks like you. Tell us what you are working on now and what you anticipate will happen with those things that you're producing, Mr. LR.
Yeah, not to go on too much of a tangent, but in that executive order that specifically calls out the Smithsonian, it says that the Smithsonian has come under the influence, quote, of a divisive race-centered ideology. And then 2 paragraphs later, it says we need to do an investigation on all monuments that have been removed since 2020. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take much research to understand that that's talking about Confederate monuments, right? So how can you in one document say that you are against divisive, quote, race-centered ideology?
But also looking into the destruction of things that were revering Confederate leaders.
Which is divisive race-centered ideology at its core, right? It doesn't get more divisive and race-centered than the Confederate, documents of secession, right?
And so, I will just add that many of those monuments were not historical in the time of the 1800s.
No.
They were, anytime there was a racial advancement in this country, someone would erect a statue of some notorious Confederate leader.
Yes.
And so it's not a new playbook, right?
No.
It's a different flavor of an old playbook, right? This is the United Daughters of the Confederacy trying to change the narrative on what the Civil War was about. It's a new version of that, right? And so we are further resolved, right? While these guys are trying to shut down and literally erase, right, from government websites stories that are not about white men, right, which sends this very clear tacit message that if it's not about a white man, it doesn't matter, right? So they're removing stories about Black veterans, Latino veterans, Native American veterans, women veterans, right, from these websites. We are committed more than ever to continue telling these stories. So we've got 2 films that we've already produced for the Smithsonian. One will show for the first time at the Power of Truths. It's called Words Unbound, Ida B. Wells, Literacy as a Tool for Liberation. We're working on a second one in that series, which is called Malcolm X, Words Unbound, Literacy as a Tool for Liberation, that looks at the ways in which both of those individuals, Ida B. Wells and Malcolm X, and then eventually other folks, have used literacy as a way to, set themselves and others free. My colleagues at the Smithsonian are definitely nervous, but also, there was a statement put out by Lonnie Bunch, the director of all of the Smithsonian museums. He used to be the director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, but now he's the whole Smithsonian system, and he basically said, we are a historical institution that tells historically accurate stories, and we're going to keep telling historically accurate stories, right? And so, at least there's that level of some sort of pushback coming, and we hope to be a part of that, of continuing to tell these stories.
Well, speaking of literacy as liberation, that's a perfect segue for our guests later in the show, as we'll celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Literacy Project, which has been helping adults gain that literacy and get high school equivalency degrees. They have a 40th anniversary celebration coming up Friday. That's later in the show. But coming up in just a minute, we'll have more about the Power of Truths Festival with our guest, Michael Lawrence Riddell from Self-Evident Education, and one of the headliners on Saturday night, Sal Rock.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
When I wake
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are talking about the 4th annual Power of Truths Festival that's happening this Friday and Saturday at Bombyx in Florence, and we're here with one of the festival's founders, Mr. LR, Michael Lawrence Riddell, as well as one of the festival headliners, Sal Rock, who we're just hearing right there.
Tell us about your keynote speaker, because Reginald Betts is fascinating.
Yeah. So Reginald Dwayne Betts will be giving the keynote presentation on Saturday, 2:40 p.m. He's the founder of Freedom Reads, which is an organization that designs, constructs, and installs libraries in prisons across the country, right? The first library that they installed was in MCI Norfolk, which is the prison where Malcolm X was incarcerated. It's in the cell block where Malcolm was incarcerated while he was there. That was sort of how I relearned about Dwayne. I had known his work earlier, and then I was doing some research on MCI for part of the script we were writing. And so Reginald Dwayne Betts was incarcerated when he was 16 years old. He was tried as an adult. He spent 7 years in prison. And he tells this story better than I would, but when he was in prison, he was placed in solitary confinement, and at one point he yelled out, "Hey, yo, somebody send me a book." And they slid under his door a book called The Black Poets, edited by Dudley Randall. And he talks about how that was this moment that sort of transformed him from a prisoner into a poet. And so he's gone on to, he got a law degree from Yale. He got funding to found Freedom Reads. And now, he's part of this organization that's trying to bring, the power of literacy to people who are incarcerated. And his work is incredible. He's a poet as well. He'll be reading from his new book, which just came out. It's called Doggerel. So I'm really, really excited that he's going to be there. We have, it's fabulous, the people who are coming to this thing. I'm honored and humbled.
They always are, but it keeps growing, so we got to keep asking about how it's growing from year in year.
That's Michael Lawrence Riddell from Self-Evident Education and the Power of Truths Festival. We're also joined by Sal Rock, who'll be performing on Saturday night, and we're talking about poetry and literacy. And Sal Rock, you are an MC, a rapper, and I watched your Tiny Desk from Home concert, which was fantastic for fans of NPR's Tiny Desk. You've told a lot of your own personal truths through your music. Can you talk about talking about the body image things that you have rapped about in the past and what that's meant to some of the audience that you have performed in front of, telling your own personal stories in this way?
Oh, wow. First of all, it was a gradual thing for me to be comfortable with being able to tell those or share those aspects of my life. And when I did, the response was so overwhelming. I didn't even believe, because we can exist on our own islands and think that all of our woes are our own, and no one understands it but us. But when I wrote particularly about having issues with body image and prevailing beauty standards and not seeing myself in my version of beauty being reflected through media and images, and then also my own challenges with self-harm, I was just completely validated. And that's not something that I look for as an artist, but my transition into telling more personal stories as a modality of healing through my art, it just generated this overwhelming response of women who had experienced the same thing, of women coming up to me after shows, showing me their arms. And there was just this unspoken language between us, this understanding, this immediate understanding. Mothers telling me that their daughters were harming, and they played the song, and now their daughters are, thriving. And, it just really made me profoundly understand the impact that honest art can have on the world. I just recently saw an interview where a comedian, said that art is not going to change the world. And I just vehemently disagree. Because when we share, through our art, through a really true lens, we can change the way people think and the way people respond to life. And, to be able to have that shared connection is so important and can create a transformation that we'll never foresee, but it's a beautiful thing when we're alerted to it.
I have a sort of selfish question for you, Sarak. Just because in one of your songs you have the line, I came up in D.C., moved to the land of the peach tree, and I'm curious what about D.C. stays in your verses, in your cadence, in your songs that you're writing now?
I don't think it's like something that I can pinpoint. I think that one thing I'm always kind of really clear about. I want to be clear in my music because I didn't start rhyming in DC. I started rhyming in Atlanta. So, and then the way that I speak, a lot of people believe that I'm from New York, or so they're like, oh yeah, she's that New Jersey rapper. She's that New York rapper. Or she's that Atlanta rapper. So I'm like, every rhyme, you might hear some reference to Chocolate City, DC, Anacostia, Congress. Like, you gonna know I'm from the city. Because a lot of times DC's artists get overlooked.
Yeah, agreed.
And I feel like we don't get the credit for the culture that we help to create. Like, even though there may not be tons of prominent, artists in hip hop that we can like point to and say, yo, that person is from DC. Like, if we think about like rap music that was coming out in the 80s and early 90s, like they had go-go, in the music,
Right.
and that's rarely acknowledged, the influence that we've had. And then just on cultural moments, like a lot of people think that Freaknik, for example, started in Atlanta, but it started from students from DC, and like, Marvin Gaye is from there. And like, so there's just so many reasons why I feel that it's important. And a lot of people tell me, you should just say that you're from Atlanta. You started, I mean, not from Atlanta, but you're an Atlanta artist, because technically you are. You started in Atlanta. I'm like, no. My city is super special. And if you know any Washingtonians, you know we are very, very territorial. So yeah, I think that that's one thing that like is it's a thread that continues, that is very intentional on my part to continue like to be present through my music.
Likewise, you often talk about like being in like a femme or like a woman's body in a space that doesn't necessarily respect that, either lyrically or just like physically. What has learning history about like some of these other strong Black women shifted in the way that you approach your songwriting? Or has it?
I mean, I think for sure. I mean, when I think about artists like a Nina Simone, who a lot of her art was, and speaking very plainly and candidly about, her being a dark-skinned, African-featured Black woman, and how that informed her experience in this world, in this country. I For me, it's important to declare how my body is an important, I don't want to say character, but it features very heavily in the way that I create art and why my art speaks the way it does. In just the way that, like, my hair, like me having locks, and how that was almost like a barrier of entry for my like visibility, my path towards visibility in rap, in the hip hop world. Not a lot of women outside of Lauryn Hill, and especially when I was coming up, that was what, a decade after Lauryn Hill when I no, yeah, a decade after Lauryn Hill is when I started, and that wasn't like really a popular thing for women to have locks. I'm pierced. I got, there's just a lot of things that about my body, my shape, my features that are really important to the way that I tell stories. And I think that it is, besides like my the sexualized part of my body. It's important for me to talk about like my body as a Black woman in this country and how collectively, we have bore the brunt of labor and abuse in this country. And so I tell those stories through not just a personal perspective, but through a collective experience of Black women globally and nationally in this country as well. So that's always been important to me when I hear about, like, for example, a Sarah Bartman or, like I said, a Nina Simone or a Fannie Lou Hamer, to like share that. And, I often make comparisons between, like, we call Sarah Bartman Venus of Hottentot, and the comparisons of Venus of Hottentot versus Venus de Milo, and how those two perceptions of beauty are so contrasting. And like, that to me is a perfect symbol of how Black women and, my ancestors have experienced the world. So like, anyway, all of that influences the way that I share, I create, and I write, because I don't like to glamorize the way that I look. I like to speak very plainly about how our physical bodies have been politicized and how our physical bodies have denied us access to so many things and have been mistreated, and regaining that ownership is really important to me.
That is Sa Rock, who will be performing as part of Know the Ledge Hip Hop History Live. I believe you said 24 bars as Fannie Lou Hamer, as part of that theatrical production combining storytelling and historical exploration, which is all part of the Power of Truth's Arts and Education Festival happening this Friday and Saturday at Bombyx in Florence. Before we let you go, Mr. LR, Michael Lawrence Riddell, a couple other highlights for people to look out for over the course of the weekend that you want to make sure that we know about?
Yeah, certainly. So on Friday, Acrobatic and Dutch Rebel are going to be running a workshop on hip hop and lyrics as, mechanisms for social change. I'm really, really excited about that. We've got a session on Saturday. Bill Newman is going to be presenting about the history of racist covenants in real estate in Northampton as
He's
part of the
the
work.
head of the Western Mass ACLU and radio host.
That's my man. I love that.
My
dude.
man too.
And he's part of the reparations committee in
Exactly.
Northampton, so it's all suited. It's all sort of underneath that guys. And the last thing I'll say, so many other things. My colleague Ibrahim Ali and I are going to present some of the raw footage from a 3-part series that we're doing on Black land ownership and agriculture, and ask for our participants to sort of help us craft what that film is going to become. But I would be really remiss to say Saturday night, 7:30, Know the Ledge. This is our third year doing it, and the first 2 times I have done a lot of incredible stuff in my life. I am a blessed dude, and professionally, it is the greatest live show that I've ever been a part of.
Nice.
And then on top of that, like, for real, there has not been an artist like Sa Rock performing in Western Mass
That's facts.
Like, facts. Yeah. She's incredible. So not only is she gonna rep as Fannie Lou Hamer, but she's also gonna do some songs as Sa Rock.
Nice.
So like, do not miss that.
No.
Like, you're just gonna feel like a dummy.
Yeah. If you're on a label with A$AP Rock and MF Doom, you are something special.
Yeah, and Saul Williams is on your debut album. I mean, come on.
Yes.
It's going to be amazing.
Speaking of the new ones coming out, when?
No set date as of yet, but
it's a work in progress
for 2025. I literally, when I hop off this this interview, I'm going to be writing, so it's coming soon.
Well, we can't wait to hear it. That is Sa Rock, who's performing Saturday night as part of the Tuesday Power of Truths Festival. You can go to Bombyx's website, bombyx.live, and find out all the details on the Power of Truths Festival. And we have been joined by Michael Lawrence Riddell, Mr. LR from Self-Evident Education, who's behind putting this festival on for the 4th time.
I feel like we should also say our frequent flyer guest, like Dr. Uzman Power Green, is also a part of this festival.
Yep.
Also presenting.
And a big part of that festival for
Love
sure.
that guy.
Thank you both so much for joining us.
Sarak, I'll
so
see you on
much.
Saturday. Thank you.
Word. And now to hear how adults all over Western Mass are learning to strengthen the basic skills they may not have been able to cultivate earlier with the Literacy Project, who are celebrating 40 years of supporting this mission.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
I snap and disembody free form like Nesta Marley. Reform this filthy game with a clean slate that's next to Garley.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family-owned and operated complete exterior remodeling business offering windows, siding, gutters, and more. windowworldofwesternma.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. The Literacy Project provides adult basic education programs and opportunities that support participants to engage meaningfully and equitably in the economic, social, cultural, and civic life of their communities here in Western Mass.
And this Friday at Progression Brewing on Pearl Street in Northampton, the Literacy Project will be celebrating their 40th anniversary of encouraging adults to continue their education.
Joining us is Colleen Kuczynski, the Executive Director of the Literacy Project, as well as Sagrario Charo Turner, who graduated from the Literacy Project programs last year and who was a graduation speaker at their commencement.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And congratulations.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you for having us.
It's our pleasure. Colleen, you have been the Executive Director of the Literacy Project for how long?
It will be 2 years in June, so I feel like I'm pretty new, contributed to the 40 years, but certainly there has been a legacy behind me that has gotten us where we are, for sure.
We are only 2 years old, too, so I understand that feeling.
Oh, yeah, see?
But in our first year, we got to interview the previous director on her way out.
Judith Roberts, who I worked with for 100 years at WRSI, the radio station down the street here. But she has an inspiring story of adult education herself, as leaving us as salesperson for a radio station, going to Harvard while still doing radio sales, and then becoming the leader of this organization.
Yeah, she left a wonderful legacy. There's no doubt about it.
Tell us about the origin story 40 years ago. Why did the Literacy Project come into existence and how?
Yeah, so it started, the Literacy Project is founded by a woman by the name of Lindy Whiten, as well as Phil Rabinovich, and another gentleman by the name of Jim Vaughn. And it began, Lindy got a grant from Greenfield Community College, actually. She's a trained reading specialist, and they got a grant to teach adults how to read and write better. And that grant then ran out within a year. And so in 1984, Lindy and Phil and Jim believed really strongly in the power of literacy and creating an equitable society for folks, and started the Literacy Project. So in 84, the doors opened for the 84-85 academic year, and as they tell the story, she says they had almost no money when they started, but they did it, and they grew quickly. They started in Greenfield, then grew very quickly into Orange, Ware, and Northampton. And then in 1995, the Amherst classes began. So that's how it all began, with a little bit of money and a lot of dreams and a lot of passion. Yeah.
Charo, how did you find out about the Literacy Project and become involved with it?
Well, I was 2 years ago. We moved from Waltham, Massachusetts, to Northampton, and I have 3 daughters: Celia, 11; Celia, 13; Marisa, 11; and Linda, 8 years old. So they start school. My husband worked in Amherst College, and I say, I need to do something for myself. So I look up, a place to get my GED, and I found the Literacy Project, very close to where we live.
Very cool.
We hear tell that you accomplished all of the programs in sort of record time, that doing it in a year is not something that is as common for some of the students. So was it the desire and drive to do it as quickly as possible there?
I really didn't have any idea what I was going to do. So I'm from Mexico, and my last time I was in school was 2001. So I was very nervous. I'm like, what I'm going to, I don't remember anything. I have to be honest.
Right.
But the Literacy Project make it happen, thanks to them.
Tell us about some of the classes that you took and what you had to learn to get your GED. Or they don't call it GED anymore, right? High set? Is that what they call it now?
Both.
They call it both. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So I took English, of course, history. That one was hard for me because I have no idea. Social studies, science, and math, which I found out that I love math. I used to not like math. I love math.
I'm exactly the opposite. I'm terrible at math.
In a lot of ways, math is easier than language because you only have to learn a few rules, and they're pretty much the same all of the time. You just change the numbers, and the rules still matter.
And most of the English language, the rules
Are
changed.
shifting all
yeah.
of the time.
See tomorrow's show with the word nerd, Emily Brewster from Merriam-Webster, where we're always talking about how strange the English language is, but keeps us interested. And we are talking about the Literacy Project, which is home-based in Greenfield, still on Bank Row, celebrating no longer on Bank Row?
We're
they
not.
changed.
We
They
just
moved.
moved. We're at 278 Main Street
Yeah.
now.
Oh, nice.
Just right around the corner.
Right
But
around
we-
the corner. I'll
we
have to
moved
come
last
visit the
June.
new offices.
Yes.
Haven't seen them yet, but still based in Greenfield and celebrating 40 years this Friday at Progression Brewing in Northampton. And we're speaking with the executive director, Colleen Kaczynski, as well as Charo Turner, who graduated from the Literacy Project programs last year. Tell us about how many people the Literacy Project works with, like Charo, every year.
Yeah, so about 200 students come through our doors annually. At one, I always say our students each come with their own unique story, their own unique circumstances for being there, and that is what makes the Literacy Project great, because they come and they enter into a community of folks who are accepting and caring and really champions for one another, and their teachers. I often say our teachers are our students' biggest champions towards success. They believe sometimes in their students more than the students believe in the student to begin with.
Right.
So, yeah.
What's changed in your course of being at the Literacy Project, either in the students that you're seeing that are using your services or the requirements that they're trying to match now?
Yeah. So the requirements for the HiSET or the high school equivalency test and or the GED, those haven't really changed much. But what we are seeing is younger students. So students can come from the age of 16 or older. And so we are seeing, for whatever reason, more younger students. And we're also seeing many English language learners. So they have gone through an ESOL program, and they're fluent in their ability to speak, but now need to learn to read and write in English better to be able to either go on or to college or to go out and get a better paying job. Or for some folks, they already have a degree from their home country, but need those skills to then be able to go back into the work that they know.
Right.
So I think those are two of the bigger changes that we're seeing, younger and many more ELL students. So
It's interesting. My wife has done a lot of work with the immigrant population and teaching English, but then to see people who were doctors in their home country and then have to kind of go through this whole process again over here. So I'm imagining that is difficult. But any idea why it's so many younger people? Are they leaving traditional school? Are they leaving school and saying
Lots
why?
of nodding. There's lots of nodding
Why they are
happening.
leaving traditional school? And I'm curious in particular if the pandemic had an influence on that, as people kind of reformed in their brain the possibilities of what life could be if you didn't do it the exact normal way all the time.
It's a good question. I think one that we're still struggling to totally understand. I do think the pandemic had something to do with it, for whether that be learning loss that happens, so there's some frustration for students, whether it's just that they've sort of discovered, like, whoa, I can do this in a different way. I don't have to be in this sort of traditional path that, frankly, for some students just doesn't work. But truthfully, as a literacy project, we really try our best to tell students to stay in school. So if they can stay, it's better, because what's interesting is there's sort of this idea that the GED or the high set is easier, and it's actually not easier. It's normed for 40% of high school students to fail it. So it's definitely a misconception, for sure.
It's interesting in how often it was disparaged when I was a kid. You know, they would call it the good enough degree, GED.
Yeah.
But it is actually that much harder. So in some ways, you know, they don't drop out of school, kids. But if you do and get it, you know, you should feel very proud of yourself if it's especially that kind of a difficult test.
Yeah, for sure.
Charo, did you feel like being a part of the Literacy Project's programs gave you a little more kinship with your daughters who are in school, like learning at the same time as them?
It was amazing. I mean, I was lost when my oldest daughter, she was 5th grade and then 6th grade, and the math started getting harder for her. And I'm looking in YouTube videos to find out. I couldn't understand, like, why these numbers turn into positive and things like that. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't understand. As soon as I started Literacy Project, I learned, and I was able to go back home and then, hey, do you have trouble with math? Let me see. I can do it. I can help you.
Yes.
And it was, I mean, she enjoys math. Her grade is going up. And because she didn't like math because she didn't understand it. She likes math because she knows what to do now.
And I think that might be a lot of the reason why people end their traditional schooling route. They feel discouraged for some reason. They're not learning in the way that they best learn, and they need somebody like the Literacy Project to intervene. Let's take a little break here. I definitely want to hear what Charo Turner is up to now that she's passed all these courses and the high set and the GED.
And what this party's going to be like. Because, I mean, we're here because you're having a party.
We're having a party.
Friday night at Progression in Northampton. That's Colleen Kaczynski, the executive director of the Literacy Project, celebrating 40 years this week. More with them coming up.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy. Admissions now open for graduate programs in 2025. Learn how to become a changemaker at umass.edu/SPP.
It's a literary song.
It is.
Wuthering Heights. You liked my Hall & Oates one there before.
I did, because that, like, not everybody knows that particular song. It wasn't a single.
Adult education. You're listening to the Fabulous 413, and we're talking about adult education and literary things like Wuthering Heights and Kate Bush, perhaps, with the Literacy Project and their executive director, Colleen Kaczynski, as well as students, Charo Turner, who went through all the programs last year. I will just take this one moment to shamelessly plug the single greatest event that I think I've ever been a part of. Even though I have done the Food Bank March and all this stuff, the weirdest, dumbest event.
The most Wuthering Heights day ever?
No, but I love that one too. It was when I teamed up with Judith Roberts from the Literacy Project to create an event, a fake graduation ceremony for the former city council president of Northampton, Bill Dwight. And he went through all of the literacy. He never got his high school diploma. He went through all of the processes, got his diploma through the Literacy Project, and we held a big graduation ceremony at the Academy of Music, and the commencement speaker was birthday girl for today, Rachel Maddow, and the event was called Maddow Cum Laude, and it raised a lot of money for the Literacy Project. And still to this day, I'm like, what's the weirdest thing that you helped to create? Yeah, that might be it.
That's the weirdest.
And Aaron McKeown, who'll be part of our Fabulous 413 Day, is going to was also the musical guest there. Anyway, I said that I wanted to know what you are up to now, Charo. That you have gone through all this. Are you going to further your education? Have you changed your employment?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. My main goal for me was just going to the Literacy Project and get my GED. That's all. However,
nice.
My instructor, Thane Thompson, if he's listening to, he really helped me to build confidence. And he's like, you can go to college. And I'm like, really? I just want my GED.
Yeah.
No, Charo, you can go to college. You have to go to college. Really? You think I can do it? Yes, you can. So now I am at Holyoke Community College.
Cool.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And what are you studying?
I'm studying English and math because I want to become helping people with their GED, just like it happened 2 years ago. I got inspired by the instructor in the literacy project. It's just amazing. Yeah.
And you want to be like a math tutor in particular for people that are going through the GED process?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is it about math? Because I don't get it.
There's a beauty to numbers.
What part of it do you love? Is there like a branch of math that you like?
I feel like it's like a puzzle, you know?
Yeah.
You start connecting everything. Everything is there for you.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get little pieces, it's hard in the beginning,
Yes.
but when you start it, it just make it a fabulous job. Yeah, so I just enjoy it.
Our engineer's weighing in that she has a degree in mathematics and it's the best.
Yeah.
My degree is sort of is in tangential math.
Because it's music?
Because it's music.
Yeah, music is
our
math.
math is weird.
Everything is math. Except, and that's probably why I don't understand anything. How does one know, Colleen Kaczynski, whether or not they're a good candidate for somebody that the Literacy Project could work with? Is a requirement that you do not have a high school degree, or do you work with people who have a high school degree but still want to better their education?
Generally speaking, it's folks who do not have a high school degree. Every once in a while, we might have someone who actually was probably a student of ours in the beginning and got their high set or GED and might want a little bit of a refresher to go on to college. They might need a little bit of a boost, if you will. But generally speaking, it's folks who don't have their high school diploma yet.
So what exactly is going to be happening at Progression?
Oh, we are going to have a party.
Progression is a brewery in Northampton, and that's where the party is this Friday.
Indeed.
It is. It is going to be fantastic. It really is meant to celebrate 40 years. It's meant to be lively and festive. There'll be food, and Carol Devine and the Mighty Fine, I get stuck on that sometimes, will be playing. But we'll also have mixed in with that sort of traditional fun and partying an opportunity to hear from some of our students and their stories and why they either like being at the Literacy Project now or what their story was and how they, much like Charo, how she got to where she is, and we'll hear about those folks. We'll get to hear from our founders who are going to do the beginning, start us off with a toast. And then, there's raffles, there's all kinds of stuff. So it's really meant to be joyous, and to celebrate all the hard work of the folks that work with us now and certainly those that worked before us and most definitely our founders.
Do you find that students often come back to work with you to kind of pay it forward a little bit?
Work with us, you mean to do things like
yes.
that? Yeah. Our students are pretty excited to come back and talk with us, talk about it, talk with others about it. I didn't actually even invite any of the students who are going to speak. They came forward on their own, either with their teacher or actually a couple of folks actually contacted Judith and asked.
The former executive director?
Former executive director. And so they'll be there too. So yeah, students, they take great pride, as they should, in the accomplishment that they have done, and they want to come back and share it. They don't want to just share it with us, but they want to share it with this other students, the students who are in that journey now, to give them the boost they need. So, yeah.
Charo, was there something in particular, a moment where you said, I'm going to muster up the courage to go and further my education? Or was it really just the inspiration of your kids being in school that you had mentioned before? Was it hard to overcome that maybe barrier of not having the education, but saying, I'm going to go for it?
Yeah, it was just a moment of realization that I can do it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's why I'm here at the school, and that's why is these amazing teachers at the Literacy Project to help me to accomplish my goals. So.
And what was it like being the graduation speaker? Because you were one of the folks that spoke at the graduation of your program. There's a face.
It was embarrassing. I was crying so bad. I couldn't speak. My voice was so shaky.
Oh, man.
However, I went to HCC and I got public speaking classes.
I need to take those so that I don't cry on the radio as much as I do, because if I were there watching you cry, then I'd be crying. I'm a crier. That's the way it is.
She did fantastic.
Well, the Literacy Project is celebrating 40 years this Friday, Progression Brewing in Northampton, and there will be food and fun and drink and music. And it's been great to hear your story, Charo Turner, who went through all of these programs and was the commencement speaker for the Literacy Project last year. And to hear from you as well, Colleen Kaczynski, Executive Director of the Literacy Project, celebrating 40 years. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
And may you have 40 more.
Yes, may you have 40 more. May your funding for this nonprofit continue for 40 more years into the future. And I'm sure if you want to support the Literacy Project and the work that they do, you can find out all those details at literacyproject.org, or heck, just go to their big event on Friday.
Indeed.
I'm sure someone will be happy to talk with you. On the next Fabulous 413, two erstwhile poets laureate and someone who can help you learn what the word erstwhile means.
National Book Award-winning poet and former Northampton Poet Laureate Martín Espada has a new book of poetry called Jailbreak of Sparrows, and we'll hear some of his new works.
It is National Poetry Month, after all.
It
and
is.
We'll have another former poet laureate of Northampton, Rich Michelson, but talking about his new picture book about the first Passover Seder at the White House. And we'll have the White House aide who helped make that historic event happen, former State Senator Eric Lesser.
And after all of those words we'll encounter with those three, it's a good thing we'll have a chat with word nerd Emily Brewster, senior editor at Merriam-Webster, to help us understand everything that they're getting at.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, well, I guess welcome back to us.
It still counts.
We leave you with Sarak, who is playing Saturday night at the Power of Truth Festival at Bombix in Florence.
See you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.